Up along the top there, this row of columns, a colonnade of columns that's called, where the colonnaded ruins now. So if you're walking around downtown, look up now and then, notice just how often you see a colonnade of columns at the top of a building. If you're not looking, you never notice, but once you start looking, they're everywhere. Including at the Marshall Fields that is now the Macy's at State and Randolph, which incidentally is one of very few buildings downtown that we can actually trace Al Capone to. Low Bridge. Came out during his trial that he used to buy all of his underwear at the Marshall Fields. Custom tailored union suits made out of ladies' glove silk that cost him like 20 bucks a pair. In 1920s money. It'd be like $500 underwear today. Over on the right, the LaSalle Building by Halliburton and Root from 1930. I can't trace Capone himself to this one. I can trace his gang here. It came out during his trial, but it was a couple of years after the trial. They were operating under the leadership of Frank the Enforcer Nitty out of a room on the 8th floor. Nitty was not quite as good at Capone to hiding from the cops. The cops broke in there one day in 1933, shot Frank the Enforcer Nitty up pretty good. And they didn't kill him, but it's not like he lived to a ripe old age or anything. Very few of the gangsters did. Gang lord was not a job where you got to have a long life expectancy. But you did get to buy really nice underwear while you were here. So sometimes, you just have to make a decision about what's really important to you. And on the right, climbing into the sky, 77 Wacker, the United Building, 1990 to Stefano and Partners, Ricardo Bofill, the architect. Now, this one up along the top has a postmodern take on those old rows of Greek columns. Even has a Greek-style pediment roof on top, reflects the sky so you can see, so it's like you can see right through it, like you're seeing the Parthenon up on the hill. Four of the columns in the middle extend all the way down to tie the entire building together. So that one is endlessly classical and endlessly modern at the same time. I don't think that building is ever really going to go out of style. The green one there is the Leo Burnett Building. Straight ahead, you can see the small white cone-shaped one. That is the 17th Church of Christ Scientist by Harry Weiss. Harry Weiss is going to come up several times on this tour. And to this, climbing into the sky to the right of it, the green one with the gold tower, one of my favorites, the Carbide and Carbon Building by Burnham and Burnham, Daniel Burnham's sons. Now, according to legend, they wanted that to look like an Art Deco version of a champagne bottle. And nobody's ever found an interview where they said that for themselves, so it might just be one of those urban legends. But it does kind of look like a champagne bottle. And in 1930, that would have been kind of charmingly subversive on their part, too. Prohibition was still going on in 1930. Champagne wasn't legal. Not that that really stopped anybody in Chicago from drinking it. Or anywhere for that matter, but in Chicago in particular, it's been estimated that the number of places where you can go to get a drink around here just about tripled under Prohibition. But it's hard to tell for sure. These illegal speakeasies were not really known for keeping good paperwork. So we end up with a lot of urban legends about it. Like over here on the right, the Builders Building, one of the last of the great Beaux-Arts buildings. People love to say that Capone had a speakeasy called the Stratosphere Club under the dome of this place. It's kind of half true. There was a club called the Stratosphere Club, but not until years after Capone went to prison and years after liquor became legal again. So it's one of those great Chicago stories that isn't exactly true. It just should be true. And we've got a lot of those. In fact, in 1895, the Philadelphia Inquirer said, "Chicago is the greatest city in the world for things to happen that never really happened." Still basically true. And coming up on the right, we've got four great buildings on the right here. The skinny skyscraper, the white one, is called Mather Tower from 1930. They initially planned to make two of those, but then 1930 happened and they ran out of money. The Glassville London House is a new addition to Alfred L. Schuller's London Guarantee Building on the left. They've just redone all of that as a hotel in the last couple of years. It's named the London House after a jazz club that was there back in the 50s and 60s. You can go on Spotify right now, look up Sarah Vaughan live after hours at the London House, Oscar Peterson Trio live at the London House, both recorded live right in there. The Art Deco right beyond it, 333 North Michigan by Halliburton and Root. This was based on the design that came in second when the Chicago Tribune had a contest as to who could design their new office tower. And the winning design ended up being the Chicago Tribune building coming up on the left, covered by some of the scaffolding up there. Without the scaffolding, it looks like a Disney villain castle. Or the 1920s version of 311 South Wacker. Before I get into that one, though, I want to talk a little bit about the building that's about to show up on the left with the yellow onion dome, the Intercontinental. Also to warn you about this low bridge coming up right here. Now, when the Intercontinental was built as the Medina Athletic Club, according to the building, they didn't plan to have the onion dome up there. They were planning to use the roof as a landing pad for Zeppelins. Blimps. Because it was the 20s. They were thinking, in 5 years, everybody's going to be traveling around in Zeppelins. Why, if we don't have a landing pad, we will be obsolete. And they never used it once. It never would have worked if they did try it. But it's a good story. So blocking our view of that now, the Chicago Tribune building from 1924 by Howells and Hoods. Now, the Tribune still operated out of there until about 2 years ago. They have now moved across the river. The building's all being redone as condos. But last summer, the cartoonist called me up and said, "Hey, my key card still works. You want to sneak in and smoke cigars and break things?" We're like, "Yeah, I want to sneak in and smoke cigars and break things." So we spend an evening throwing bricks through the drywall, helping ourselves to such souvenirs as we could find, and leaving messages on the bricks. Rumor has it Chance the Rapper wants to buy one of the condos, so we left a lot of like welcome Chance messages hidden in the bones of the building. So coming on the left now, the NBC Tower. We call this one postmodernism just because it's from the 80s, but really with its clean lines, streamlined verticality, simple geometric art, it is more Art Deco than Art Deco. It's my favorite Adrian Smith design by far. I love this one. I always feel like Superman ought to be flying around the Spire up there. And on the right, the one with the pointy spire is number 2 Prudential Plaza. Including the spire, that one is 998 feet tall. If that were my building, that would drive me nuts. I'd be up there with yardsticks all the time, taping to the spire, trying to get over 1,000. The other dads always know what I'm talking about. All right, so if you look beyond these rather bland-looking modernist buildings that are coming up on the right, you can see this one with all of the wavy balconies, creating the impression like the whole building is made out of liquid. That is called Aqua Tower, a primarily residential building. Lady Gaga had a place in there for a while. Yeah, the one right back there with the wavy balconies. Now, incidentally, when that was built, it briefly held the record of being the tallest building in the world, designed primarily by a woman, Chicago architect Jeannie Gang. And it got beaten out by some buildings overseas later, but Jeannie Gang is about to take that record back in a really big way. Coming up on the right here, this building still under construction, but climbing way, way up into the sky. That is called the Wanda Vista Tower. Hey, Andre. So you might notice up there, there's this space where the couple of the floors are a little bit further apart. That's you might have heard someplace that tall buildings are known to sway in the wind a little bit. Officially, they don't sway, what they do is give, but that means basically the same thing. So to cut down on that, that empty space you see up there is what's called a blow-through floor. It's just a whole empty space for the wind to blow through, something we have never tried in Chicago before. Now you got to be really careful when you do those things too. If you're not careful, a blow-through floor can turn the entire building into the world's largest whistle. I mentioned that to someone who lives in the building next door the other day. They were like, "What?" They know what they're doing. So coming up over on the left, this fountain is called Centennial Fountain. It was built to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the group that pulled off probably our greatest engineering feat in Chicago when they reversed the whole flow of this river about in the early 20th century. Now, this river used to flow out to the lake about like you'd expect it to, but the trouble is the lake is our drinking water. And into the river we were pouring all of our sewage, all of our garbage. That would flow out into the lake and we would drink it right back up. Which is not just disgusting, it is also a fantastic way to spread cholera and dysentery and all of those Oregon Trail diseases. So, in what may have been the most Chicago moment of all time, instead of saying, "Hey, let's stop polluting the river," they said, "Hey, why don't we push the entire river backwards?" But that's what they did. They dug a canal that was deeper than the lake. That started the lake flowing into the canal. And long story short, the whole river got pushed backwards, so now all of our sewage would be sent to St. Louis instead. Hey! Nice to remember every time there's a Cardinals game. All right, over on the left, Riverview 2 and Riverview 1, a couple of newer residential buildings by DeStefano and Partners. I understand they finally found a buyer for the penthouse at Riverview 1. It was on the market for years at $12.9 million. 9,600 square feet and includes a private basketball court, which is cool, but how'd you like to have the condo underneath the basketball court? I just gotta figure, if a guy's gonna spend that much on a condo, he's probably, I don't picture him playing basketball. I think of him, sitting in his armchair, swirling his brandy and talking like this all night long. And coming up over on the left, behind this white wall is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Which breaks my heart because they were planning on building a really fantastic skyscraper there a while back called the Chicago Spire. That was going to be 2,000 feet tall. It had a very distinctive corkscrew design that would have become an instantly recognizable symbol of the city. In fact, our mayor at the time said it was going to be like the Statue of Liberty of Chicago, like a welcoming beacon to the city. For all of the pilgrims who sail across Lake Michigan every year looking for a better life. But 2008 happened, the economy tanked, they never got further than just digging out the core foundation of the building before they ran out of money. So now we just have this massive hole in the ground over there. And every few months we see a new design for what somebody else is planning to build there instead. So far nothing has gotten off the ground, but we'll see what happens. And coming up on our left over here is the world's largest fidget spinner. That was the joke of the year 2 years ago. It's like this year's White Claw jokes. Actually, this is called Lake Point Tower, based on a design by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, the guy we normally associate with plain black rectangles. But see, in the wilder days of his youth, before he discovered the rigid joys of the rectangle, he was designing much curvier buildings, including a clover-shaped office tower for Berlin. And that one never got built, but a couple of his students found the design, used it as inspiration for Lake Point Tower in the early 60s, which is primarily residential. For years, tour guides like to tell people that Oprah lived in the circular thing up top. There's now a plaque in the building that says Oprah never lived here, just to clear that up. What is actually up top there is a French restaurant called Cité. It looks like it ought to be a revolving restaurant, but it just sits there. Speaking of revolving, though, we do have the new Ferris wheel at Navy Pier. There was a smaller one here before. We took that one down a couple of years ago, sent it off to Branson, Missouri to be rebuilt. Now, it actually makes it part of a grand Chicago tradition of sending our old Ferris wheels to Missouri, along with all the sewage. The first really large Ferris wheel built was that one for the World's Fair in 1893. That was a 27-story Ferris wheel at a time when most people had never seen a building taller than 3 or 4 stories. After we were done with it, we sent it to St. Louis for their World's Fair in 1901. My great-great-grandfather rode it while it was there, loved it so much he became a carny for 5 years. Such was the magic of the Chicago Ferris wheel. And Navy Pier on our left, I have to admit, has really upped their game in recent years. When I was working there 15 years ago, it was all the same stuff you see at every other tourist destination. Now they've got a lot more local specific things. In fact, there are 2 places in there, the Billy Goat and the DMK Burger Bar, where you can try the real Chicago treat. It's a drink you normally only find at old school Chicago bars called Jepson's Malort. Jepson's Malort is a liqueur that tastes like, did you ever get a root canal? You know that taste in the back of your throat during a root canal? If you mix that with loneliness, then that would be the taste of Jepson's Malort, the true Chicago treat. A friend of mine likes to mix it with grapefruit juice, but 2 wrongs do not make a right. I'm going to hop off the mic for a second while we turn so everybody has a chance to get this photo with the skyline that is coming up on your right-hand side as we turn. One of the best views in the world, and we can only get it from right here.